U.S. stocks plunged today as concerns grow over the impact of new tariffs, but the Trump administration says there's a strong divergence between the stock market and actual business confidence. Joining us now live at the White House is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. What's the latest with market reactions and how is the White House responding?
Good evening to you. So the market reaction has been actually quite significant today. The Wall Street had a very bad day. The S&P 500 fell by 2.7%, which is its biggest daily drop since December. And also the tech-heavy Nasdaq also fell by around 4%, its worst day since 2022. I mean, while it comes as investors are still grappling with the potential impact of tariffs amid the worries that tariffs could make people less likely to buy new things and make new investments, which could potentially slow down the whole economy. But the White House in response tells us that they are looking at more the business reactions, saying in a statement that they're seeing a strong divergence between animal spirits of the stock market and what they're actually seeing from businesses and business leaders. They also say that the latter is more meaningful when it comes to predicting the economy in the medium to long term. The White House also gave us a list of statistics, including one showing that small business optimism soaring after Trump's election win to a new high in 4 years, and manufacturing expanding in January for the first time in 2 years. They're also citing the new investments that came in after Trump pushed his policies, saying Trump's policies drove in about $3 trillion in new investments to the U.S. Meanwhile, President Trump himself also did acknowledge that there could be, quote, a little bit of disturbance coming in from the tariff policies, adding that there could be a transition period. But he also, over the weekend, doubled down on his policies, saying that tariffs will eventually bring wealth. Watch.
All I know is this: we're going to take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to become so rich, you're not going to know where to spend all that money. I'm telling you, you just watch. We're going to have jobs. We're going to have open factories. It's going to be great.
Meanwhile, on Monday, both Canada and China responded with retaliatory tariffs. And China's new tariffs on some agricultural products in the U.S. went into effect today in Canada. So Ontario announced a new 25% surcharge on its electricity exports to the U.S. Of course, that comes after the U.S. imposed new tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico last week. Back to you.
Iris, certainly a lot to watch for in the coming days on the economy. In other news today, President Trump touted an arrest of a pro-Palestinian student protester. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. So this morning, President Trump on Truth Social touted the Saturday ICE arrest of Mohammed Khalil. He's a graduate student at Columbia University who holds a U.S. green card, but he previously led pro-Palestinian protests on college campus. Trump, in a statement, says that, quote, "This is the first arrest of many to come. We will find, apprehend, and deport these terrorist sympathizers from our country, never to return again." And it comes after President Trump, in his early days of his second term, signed a new executive order trying to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses, including by potentially revoking these students of visas if they're not from the U.S. Melina.
Iris Tao from the White House, thank you so much for that report. And the former head of President Trump's personal security detail is now the director of the U.S. Secret Service. Sean Curran's life was changed after the first assassination attempt on President Trump. He was among the special agents who jumped on the stage to protect the president during the shootout. Trump later appointed him to lead the agency he works for. In a statement, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says, quote, "Sean's brave actions when he risked his life to help save President Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania, is a testament to his dedication to the mission of the U.S. Secret Service." And moving on to Capitol Hill, lawmakers debate the merits of a stopgap bill to avoid a government shutdown. Our Washington correspondent has the latest on the government funding battle on Capitol Hill.
We're not seeing a clean CR. We're going to see a CR where you see defense spending augmented, but also allowing for new contracts and new starts. But we can't do a year-long clean CR and say that we're deterring China and Russia. It would be a lie.
The Republican proposal to avert a government shutdown increases defense spending by $6 billion and cuts down $13 billion on non-defense spending.
Let me be clear. This is a continuing resolution, which means that we're basically extending the funding that everyone voted for back in December. So there's no reason why the Democrats should not join us and make this bipartisan. There's no additional partisan policy that has been put in this bill. As a matter of fact, there's only positive increases in spending.
House Republican leadership argues that their proposal contains no poison pills, but at least one House Republican lawmaker, Congressman Thomas Massie, has already signaled he will not support a continuing resolution, while House Democratic leadership has accused Republicans of cutting them out of the process altogether.
And what we've seen with Speaker Johnson is that he walked away from the bipartisan talks. We have talks ongoing right now. And what I support is an effort that's the same thing that the Republican chair of appropriations, Cole, supports, which he says that a bipartisan deal would be better than a CR.
Leader Hakeem Jeffries is very clear that we cannot support a continued resolution when Republicans who control the House and the Senate have not made any effort to negotiate with us on what the CR would look like.
Republicans can only afford to lose 2 votes on the House floor, and it remains to be seen if any Democrats break party lines and join Republicans to vote for the continuing resolution.
A continuing resolution that the Republican majority is proposing doesn't do anything to address the concerns I'm hearing from my constituents here in Oregon. It seems to double down on the dangerous cuts, including to Medicaid, does nothing to protect Medicare and Social Security.
It's important to note that Monday afternoon, the Senate voted to confirm Lori Chavez de Reamer to become the next Labor Secretary. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And lawmakers also voted today to give the Department of Homeland Security new capabilities to counter the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party worldwide. The bill is called the Shield Against CCP Act. It establishes a working group in the DHS to counter threats from the CCP, ranging from terrorists, cybersecurity, border, and transportation. The bill also passed the House last year, but was never picked up by the Democrat-controlled Senate at the time. Now the bill will be sent to the new Senate for consideration. And high hopes start off the week as U.S. and Ukrainian officials are scheduled to meet in Saudi Arabia. They're planning discussions on the deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war. NTD's David Lamb reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia on Monday as part of a 3-day trip to speak with Ukrainian counterparts. He plans to advance President Trump's goal to end the Russia-Ukraine war.
You know, we're hopeful we'll have good meetings tomorrow. I mean, the minerals deal's on the table. That's continuing to be worked on. It's not part of this conversation per se, and it's not something that tomorrow can be successful without it. It's certainly a deal the president wants to see done, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen tomorrow.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also arrived on Monday, expecting to meet with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al Saudi, whose country has played mediating roles since the war started in 2022.
Ahead of Tuesday's meeting, Rubio said that the minerals deal is important, but it's not the main agenda topic, and that more details need to be worked out on. But the main goal of the meeting is to see what kind of concessions Ukraine is willing to make.
According to State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce, Rubio will also meet with the Crown Prince to discuss ways to advance shared interests in the region and strengthen the U.S.-Saudi relationship. After talks broke down during Zelensky's visit to the White House in February, Trump froze military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
It'd be a very hard thing to do business like this. I can tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said it a lot of times.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements.
In the days after, Zelensky said he regretted how the meeting went and was willing to renegotiate over a rare earth minerals deal in exchange for continued U.S. military aid.
After Saudi Arabia, Rubio will travel to Canada for the G7 foreign ministers meeting to advance President Trump's America First policy agenda. David Lamb, NTD News, back to you.
And we now know who will succeed Justin Trudeau as Canada's next Prime Minister, Mark Carney, a newcomer to politics.
To respond, my government will put into action our plan to build a stronger economy, to create new trading relationships with reliable trading partners, and to secure our borders.
The former central banker reportedly met with Trudeau's cabinet on Monday to plan the handover. Trudeau announced his resignation as leader of the ruling Liberal Party in January. An election is expected to take place in late April or early May. For now, Carney will be sworn in soon and will serve the remainder of the party's ruling term. In his victory speech, Carney took several shots at President Trump. He called the political climate dark days brought on by a country we can no longer trust. In related news, Ontario announcing a 25% surcharge on electricity that it provides to Americans. Canada's most popular province says the price increase is a retaliation for President Trump's tariffs. Ontario provides electricity to Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. In total, the move impacts electricity costs for 1.5 million Americans. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said he would consider cutting electricity off entirely if the trade dispute escalates. Ford said Ontario's tariff would remain in place. Despite the 1-month reprieve from Trump, Quebec is also considering similar measures with electricity exports to the U.S. And to discuss the latest moves with Trump's tariffs policies, we're happy to have on Paul Winfrey. He's the president and CEO of the Economic Policy Innovation Center. Paul, thanks for joining us today. First, I want to play you a clip of President Trump talking about tariffs and get your reaction. Listen in.
Even as you're seeing this optimism and excitement, there's some nervousness over your tariffs. Markets have been selling off. People are not sure how to view it. Why did you roll back or put a pause into some of the tariffs until April 2nd?
Because I wanted to help Mexico and Canada to a certain extent. I wanted to help the American car makers until April 2nd. April 2nd, it becomes all reciprocal. What they charge us, we charge them.
Paul, how do you assess the recent delays to tariffs? Do you think this eases the transition to the reciprocal tariffs set for April?
First of all, it's a great question, and I do. So the president has been very clear that he wants to use tariff policy to negotiate with Canada and Mexico in particular, given that we're all part of the USMCA. And that's exactly what the president's doing here. I mean, one of the chief economists for the president, Kevin Hassett, his National Economic Council director, said over the weekend that this is a drug war, and that we wanted to see, as a country, major movements made by both Canada and Mexico before we let these tariffs go into effect. And that's what's happening right now. The president's giving both of those countries negotiating power.
Now, as for how this affects the business community regarding the clarity on tariffs for the business community, let's listen to what Trump had to say about that clarity.
But, the tariffs could go up as time goes by, and they may go up. And, I don't know if it's predictability. For years, the globalists, the big globalists, have been ripping off the United States. They've been taking money away from the United States. And all we're doing is getting some of it back. And we're going to treat our country fairly.
From your assessment, Paul, do you think Trump plans to make the reciprocal tariffs permanent? And do you think this is the best strategy in the long term for America?
Well, I think that what Trump's trying to do here is to reset trade policy. And so I do think that some of the reciprocal tariffs will be permanent. At the same time, it's really difficult to see what the long-term strategy of the United States is. And that's one of the reasons why the business community and the stock markets and some of the other economics are responding to it. They don't know what's going on, and they're responding to some of this uncertainty with economic losses. Once we start seeing real changes made in place, I think that we're going to regain some of the value that's been lost. But until then, there's still real risk in the markets that's showing up throughout the economy.
So speaking of the impact here that this is going to have, we know today China implemented tariffs on numerous U.S. farm products. How quickly, Paul, do you think we can expect to see effects of those tariffs on American agriculture?
I think that we'll see them show up immediately. Right? I mean, we're seeing them show up in futures markets right now. The real question is what we're going to see in other policy that's going to try to offset the cost of those tariffs. So there's a lot that that USDA can do, the Department of Agriculture can do, using authorities and money that they have at their disposal to lessen the blow on U.S. agriculture.
I wanted to ask you next about a possibility of a recession. So let's listen to what Trump had to say about the possibility of that happening this year.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. It's going to be great ultimately for the farmer.
How long do you expect this transition period to take? How long do you think it will take Trump to bring manufacturing back to America?
Well, I think it'll take quite some time. I mean, we saw this is one of the major policy pillars from the Biden administration too. You know, it was a part of the CHIPS and Science Act. It was also a part of the IRA. And the reality is, it takes months, if not years, to rebuild the manufacturing base in the United States. I think Trump is going about this in a slightly different way, and I think actually a more productive way that will have more success than the Biden administration did. But that said, it could take quite some time to really rebuild the economy to the place that it was decades ago.
And lastly, I want to ask you what's going on in the Congress front. We know that lawmakers are facing a deadline to pass a government funding bill by midnight this Friday, or risk a federal shutdown. Paul, from your opinion, what's worth noting in the continuing resolution that Republicans have put forth?
Well, the first thing is that this really isn't a continuing resolution. It makes a lot of changes to a standing policy, including cutting spending by about $8 billion, which was a welcome sight to me. It will also provide the Trump administration with the flexibility that they need on DOGE and what OMB is doing to try to continue to limit spending growth and reduce regulations. And all of those things will have a beneficial effect on the American economy, both in the short run and in the long run. But right now, we're going to see a lot of drama play out over the next week from people posturing and saying that they will or won't vote for this continuing resolution. But at the end of the day, I think that it will get done and that the government will be funded, and then Congress will pivot to the reconciliation bill, which is really going to be the main show of this year.
Right. Thank you so much for those insights, Paul Winfrey, President and CEO of the Economic Policy Innovation Center. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.